back, I'm Kim Bailey, and this is Floral Art Review. And it's early in the morning because we're in the middle of a heat wave here in the last few days and for the next day or so. And so I'm recording it a little bit earlier than I normally would, so you might hear the birds outside because I've got everything open trying to take advantage of the coolness of the evening before the day heat hits. Let's get on to our review today. As you know, each of these videos is about a competition piece of mine which we provide the image for to our AI design eye so that it can give me an analysis of the principles and elements of design for this particular competition piece and some suggestions for improvement of the design. This week we're looking at a design where the title was Water. It was an online design, so the design itself was judged from the image a few years ago now. And each of the class titles in that competition was an element, so water, wind, earth, fire. And I chose water. I thought that best was for me to be able to represent. It's a contemporary design, as you can see. It uses some contemporary techniques. What I've got is a clear glass vase that opens out at the top. It's sitting on a cork base, and inside the vase, to hide the Kenzan that is holding the plant material in place, there is some coconut fibre, and some of the plant material extends down into the vase so that we get that magnified effect that water gives us with placement inside a vase. Across the top of the vase there is a cork rim around the top of the vase itself, and then I've made a raft of cork that fits into the top section of the vase that I can use as a structure to place the plant material, to hold it in place and have it use the water that's in there without having to have it all the way down into the vase and make the vase a bit cluttered, I guess. And into the corks as well, I've put some bamboo skewers and I've made a lattice at the top of those, once again to hold things in place, but to give it a little bit of a different twist. Bamboo, as you know, grows in Southeast Asia and needs lots of water to grow, and so I thought that was a take on the class title. Same with cork, we use cork to float along the water, and I thought that tied in nicely with the design. I've used some lamandra, which is an Australian native. It's a plant that is often seen around water and as a grass, and some grevillea and a single grevillea flower. What I wanted was, in the plant material, was something that gave you the idea of movement of water, so that the water itself is in the base of the vase, and then the movement of water and the idea of being just beside water and that calming effect that water can have. So I wanted to keep it in neutral or calming tones, so the greens and the creams and the whites, and just have the placements so that you felt like you were sitting down beside a stream. It's not as good a design as I would have liked. I couldn't bring the visualization into reality, and so I thought, well, I'll put this design in because I had committed to the online competition, and now I've got the opportunity to have an independent analysis tell me exactly what is needed with the design. Have some ideas myself, but I really would like to see if they gel with the principles and elements of design, or whether it's just me trying to improve the design to make it more reflective of the title without thinking about the principles and elements of design. So let's now have a look at what Design Eye has said about those principles and elements of design and the suggestions for improvement. We have an overall summary first. The title Water evokes ideas of flow, transparency, movement and fluidity. So I was writing and thinking of my interpretation. The design successfully draws from these themes using vertical and horizontal elements within a transparent container to convey movement and stillness in harmony. So the idea that I wanted, that I've just expressed to you, you can see is expressed in this particular design. Does it evoke the feeling of water? I don't think so. I wouldn't. Often, as judges, what we like to see is that if I look at a design, I know what the class title is. And when I look at this design, I don't necessarily feel like it's water. I feel like it's more harmony or quiet or stillness. And that's not a good thing in terms of this particular design. So let's look at the individual elements and principles of design now and see what we can do about those. We look at line first of all. This design strongly features vertical lines from the tall green reeds, creating upward energy and a sense of direction. The horizontal driftwood cork component provides a calming counterbalance, enhancing the concept of water as both dynamic and serene. Now, what I was concerned about when I put that cork stopper together at the top of the vase is that it would cut the design in half, and so I knew that I needed some really strong placements above the cork to keep pulling your eye up and not be stopped at the vase and the top of the vase or just what was around the top of the vase. So it's good that the elements are there, and I like the idea that one of those vertical lines actually moves out because that gives you movement away from the very structured design it would be, and it brings you back down to the larger of the grevillea leaves, the foliage that is underneath it. Texture next of all. There is effective texture contrast between the sleek green leaves, the feathery fronds, the rough corks and the layered contents inside the glass vessel. These varying textures suggest both the clarity and the complexity of water in nature. It's an interesting analysis of this particular part of our principles and elements because, as you would know from any of the other videos that you might have watched, texture is where I like to focus my designs. And for me, there is not enough textural contrast in this design. The rough part of it is implied rather than obvious, except for the coconut fibre right at the base of the vase itself. And I think it needs something with a bit more strength. They're all very light or feathery or sleek placements rather than something that is a bold statement, a solid statement. So where I've got the uprights, I think I might have been better using typha leaves, just a little bit wider, still give you that nice long line, but wider, and so a little bit more dominant in the line, and a texture that can be matte or shiny, depending on whether I wiped it down with water first or not. Colour. The palette is harmonious and natural with greens, browns and beige tones dominating. The creamy yellow bloom offers a subtle focal contrast, ensuring the overall look remains serene yet engaging. So that's exactly what I wanted with the colour palette. And I can't imagine, in terms of the class title and this design, using any other colours in the design. I think blue would be too obvious and too twee. And I think that my idea all the way through was to keep it as quiet and as reflective as I could. Space. This design makes excellent use of negative space. The openness between the vertical lines and the restraint in material selection keep the composition light, airy and reflective of water's translucence. So it's an interesting analysis that it is seeing the connection between class title and what I've presented in the design much more clearly than I can. So it's one of the other reasons why it's great to use this resource to look at designs, and I use it now to look at designs before I enter a competition, so that I can get a sense of, am I not seeing something? Am I reading too much into it? Am I trying too hard to tell the judge what the story is with this particular design? I like the idea of the excellent use of negative space. It does have a lot of negative space in it. And the space between the leaves of the foliage from the grevillea is negative space, but it forms part of that design because it encompasses a whole area, but not fill it with solid mass of material. And that line and that distance, and so the negative space, is reflected all through the placements in the design. So that part of it I've done well. I'll even say that myself. form. The upright cylinder form of the vase reflects the vertical lines above it, anchoring the piece. The overall form is asymmetrical but balanced, giving visual interest without appearing cluttered. And again, as I said very early, that's exactly what I wanted. I didn't want it to be a cluttered or a full design. I wanted it to have lots of negative space, lots of air through it, lots of time for your eye to rest, but know where it was going to move next. Pattern and repetition. The repeated vertical elements and circular corks offer rhythm. The natural materials below the waterline reflect a cyclical pattern, reinforcing the title. I don't see that, but I'm happy that that's the analysis that's there. As I said, my idea for the placements below the water was to have minimal material there, but have it magnified so that it appeared to be the same size or reflect the same size as the placements that are outside the water. That might be one I have to come back to and think about. Balance. There's pleasing asymmetrical balance. The left would arc and cork float gently offset the vertical energy on the right. So the placement of the foliage is balancing, because it's got the little cork above it, is balancing the denser form of the flower on the right. I probably would like to see something more, a little bit higher in the design, not another flower necessarily, but perhaps a smaller piece again of that grevillea foliage, just to bring that part of the design up to the top of the design, because the more I look at it, the more I feel like the design almost stops just above the grevillea placement, flower placement, but there's still a fair bit of the lavender leaf above that, but it's almost lost in the air. It almost goes too high. Rhythm. Rhythmic flow is created through the repetition of vertical lines and the circular cork forms. The viewer's eye is naturally led upward from the base to the bloom. So it's seeing that again, that you go up to the bloom and to that level in the design. Doing it like this, I shouldn't. Your eye goes up to that level, and because of the placement then of that arc of foliage material, your tendency might be to come back down into the design and to miss those top bits. So if I had something small, minimal placement along the same lines, maybe just behind one of those top placements that it arced forward or arced around to maybe to the flower side, then that's going to bring you up to the whole of the design, the completed design. And so what could be the dominance of the vase at the bottom because of the darker colours down there is minimised if you're moving up and through the design and just sort of glancing across the top of the vase as you continue to move around the design. Dominance and emphasis. The pale yellow grevillea bloom serves as the point of emphasis, subtly contrasting with the dark green foliage without overwhelming the design. So exactly as I mentioned earlier, I didn't want a colour or a bolder, more solid flower or massive flowers to be the dominant part of this design. I just wanted something that reflected that there was a little bit of nuance in the colour palette, but it still had that quiet, tranquil look to the design. Harmony. A unified mood is created through consistent colour, form and material choices. The concept of water is reinforced through transparency, minimalism and delicacy. It's an interesting way of seeing that the concept is reinforced. That's what I wanted, but I just still feel that it's not quite hitting the mark, and so I'm very interested to see what the suggestions are. We've still got a couple more principles and elements to get through, but very keen to see what the suggestions are. Contrast. Soft versus sharp, straight versus curved, natural versus man-made. These contrasting qualities create visual interest while maintaining cohesion. So yes, there's contrast there, as I said earlier about the texture, I would like a little bit more textural contrast, because we're not looking for contrast in colour. Often in a design we might look for contrast in colours to give us a little bit more emphasis of the class title, but in this case I'm not looking for the colour contrast. I would like a little bit more of the textural contrast, but as it says, there is contrast there in some other ways. Proportion and scale. The scale of the design works well with the container. The tall elements are well proportioned to the base, and the components inside the water remain visible without clutter. So that was an important part, as I've said, of this design, was to use that water as part of the design focus without it being pulling the design down or pulling your eye down into the base of the design. I think that in terms of scale, if I had that placement that I've talked about higher up in the design, it might help with the scale in terms of the vase and the plant material, because at the moment it's only just not focusing on the vase itself. In proportion wise, there's a tendency almost to, it's just on the edge. It's on the edge of being, am I drawn to the vase or am I drawn to the plant material that is above the vase and have the vase as just part of that? So I'd have to look at that again and be very careful about those placements. We're up to the suggestions, so let's see what we've got that we can do. Number one, consider slightly refining the mechanics of the cork and stick element. A more polished join might enhance the illusion of a floating object without distracting from the organic feel. That's very true. I think that in trying to make it sit comfortably and using it as the structure, that I have made it too dense, and perhaps if I had made just a raft, a circular raft, so that there was the cork around the edge of the vase, then a gap that was just water, and then a circular cork mass placement, so 3 or 4 corks just in the middle of that vase, and I could have worked it mechanically so that it stayed in that place for the time that I needed to take the images, and that would create less dense area, this mass at the top of that vase. So yes, I'll definitely play around with that and have a look at that. And the beauty of that is that now I've got these suggestions, I can recreate this design, and I've got the original image, and then I can try these other images. And why I say compare them in images is that our eye and our brain tell us what we want to see in some cases, and so it's easier to do the comparison image to image, because your brain's not going to fill in any gaps. We're just looking at an image this time around, not looking at the object and making it work. I'm looking over there because that's where the design was originally when I took the photo. Suggestions: adding 1 or 2 submerged curved elements like a single grass loop could suggest water movement more dynamically within the glass cylinder. I think that that's probably an issue with the image, and that's something that we learn the more that we do the online competitions, is that we have to be so professional about taking the images. And we're used to, well, I'm certainly used to going to competitions, taking a photo because it's a record of what I did. But once we started to have online competitions, we had to be much more focused on getting the best image possible for the judges to look at. They only get one image to look at in most cases, and so we need to make it so that, once again, because we've looked at it for so long and so many different angles, we need to take lots of images of it and choose the one that best displays the design, not the one that looks most like what you looked at when you were looking at it, because often you're looking down at it, and when the judges see the image, that they're going to be looking from the perspective of where you've taken the photo, but it might not necessarily highlight the things that you know are there because you put the design together, but are not showing in the image. So there are some, all of that said, there are some looped areas in the water, but they're not obvious in this image, and so what that tells me is that I have to be more careful about taking the images. Another good suggestion. So the last suggestion is: the second subtle bloom, perhaps one tucked lower, might help echo the surface and depth motive of water and balance the top heavy feel. So I think that that's a reasonable suggestion. I could have one just in the corks themselves, or one, I was going to say one in the water, but that will make it, expand it too much, amplify it too much, and I don't want that heaviness at the base there. So a smaller of the grevillea flowers just sitting on the corks on the side where the bigger foliage placement is would work. But I also think that something higher up, the foliage higher up, is going to be a help as well. So there we have our review for this week on the design water. And I, as you can hear, have learnt a lot about what I need to do with this design when I was at a place where I didn't know. I knew I needed to do something, but I didn't really know what to do. Now, I know that that's not an unusual place to be when you're a floral designer. You've put so much effort into getting a design together, and when it comes back and you're not as happy with the way it looked, or you're not as happy with the results, and you don't really know what to do with the design. So this resource that we've developed here for you is there for those circumstances, as well as I said, to help you before you enter a competition, so you can see where you're hitting the mark with your design and where you might need to adjust a few things. Sometimes it's one or two little things, as you saw in this design, and other times it might be you've missed this point, there's no texture, there's no contrast, whatever else it might be. So I encourage you to use this resource. Just go to the website, follow the instructions there, and it will help you, because it has helped me. It will help you on your floral art journey. For now, that's this week's analysis. I'm Kim Bailey, and this is Floral Art Review.